This is the incredibly dramatic moment when an iguana found itself trapped by the rising tide and fighting for its life. With every passing second, the water crept higher, threatening to engulf the helpless reptile completely. Time seemed to slow down, intensifying the drama of the situation. In a desperate bid to free itself from the rising waters, the iguana struggled against the unforgiving rocks, its tiny claws scrabbling for purchase on the slick surface. Its powerful tail lashed out, creating miniature splashes as it fought to find a way out of its precarious situation. The rocky terrain offered no respite, making escape seem like an impossible task. Yet even in the face of this daunting challenge, the iguana refused to give up. As if driven by an innate instinct to survive, it continued to thrash around, hoping against hope that a way out would materialize. With each passing moment, the urgency of the situation became more apparent. The iguana's heart pounded in its chest, its eyes wide with fear and determination. And then, as if in response to its silent plea, the tide began to turn. The water level started to rise, inching closer and closer to the stranded iguana, now trapped between the rising water and the unforgiving rocks. The iguana's struggle became even more frantic. It thrashed and twisted, its movements becoming more and more desperate as the water closed in on it. Suddenly, in a last-ditch effort to free itself from the deadly grip of the rocks, the iguana made a break for it. It lunged forward, its claws extended, aiming to create some space between itself and the immovable rocks. Would this risky move pay off, or would it be the end of the iguana's struggle? The answer hung in the balance, as the iguana fought tooth and nail to carve out a sliver of freedom. And as the tide rose higher, the tension mounted. With each passing moment, the iguana's survival seemed more and more precarious. The waves crashed over it, momentarily drowning it in the churning water. Yet it did not give up. It continued to fight, its spirit unbroken, its will to live driving its every move. The iguana had been trapped for what felt like an eternity, its body growing weaker with every passing moment. The relentless assault of the waves against the rocks created a deafening roar, drowning out any hope of rescue. But the iguana soldiered on, refusing to succumb to the rising tide. Then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the tide shifted. The water levels started to recede, offering the iguana a glimmer of hope in its darkest hour. With renewed vigor, the iguana redoubled its efforts, its eyes gleaming with determination. It clawed and scratched at the rocks, its body trembling with exertion. And then, miraculously, it managed to wriggle free. The iguana scrambled out of the trap, its body battered and bruised but alive. It shook itself free of the clinging seaweed and rocks, its heart pounding in its chest. The iguana looked back at the spot it had been trapped in, a mixture of gratitude and relief washing over it. The rocks that had been its prison now loomed over it harmlessly. The tide that had threatened to engulf it ebbed away into the distance. As the iguana retreated to safety, the full extent of its ordeal hit home. Its body was covered in scrapes and bruises, a testament to the fierce battle it had fought against the rising tide. But these wounds were badges of honor, each scratch telling a tale of resilience and determination. The iguana had stared death in the face and emerged victorious. It had survived the wrath of the ocean and the clutches of the rocks, emerging stronger and wiser for the experience. As the iguana took stock of its surroundings, it realized that it wasn't alone. Other iguanas were gathered nearby, their eyes filled with concern and admiration. They had witnessed the harrowing ordeal, and their respect for their trapped companion had grown immeasurably. With a mixture of relief and triumph, the iguanas greeted their rescued comrade. They nudged him with their snouts, sharing in his joy and celebrating his survival. In that moment, the bond between the iguanas was unbreakable. They had come together to support each other, their unity forged in the face of adversity. The news of the iguana's incredible escape spread quickly through the animal community. Other creatures who had witnessed the struggle from afar gathered to share in the celebration. Birds with feathers ruffled in excitement, mammals with wide eyes recounted the tale, and reptiles with scales shimmering in the sun nodded in admiration. Each creature had its own story of survival, and they recognized the strength and determination it had taken for the iguana to escape the clutches of the rocks and the rising tide. The iguana, once the center of attention, now basked in the glow of its newfound fame. It basked on a nearby rock, its body relaxed, its eyes half closed in contentment. The ordeal had taken a toll on it, but the outpouring of admiration and respect from its fellow creatures had rejuvenated its spirit. It knew that it had pushed itself beyond its limits, and the scars on its body would serve as constant reminders of that. But it also knew that these scars were marks of courage, testaments to its resilience. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, the celebration came to an end. The animals slowly dispersed, their voices echoing the iguana's name in reverence. It stood alone on the rock, watching them go, a sense of gratitude filling its heart. It had been saved by the very elements that had tried to destroy it, the shifting tides and the unyielding rocks, and it had faced its fears head-on, refusing to give in to the rising tide. The iguana had triumphed over adversity, and in doing so had become a legend among the creatures of the island. And so the tale of the iguana trapped by the rising tide and saved by the very elements that had tried to destroy it became a thing of legend. Passed down through generations of animals, it served as a beacon of hope and inspiration, reminding them that no matter how dire the situation, hope should never be abandoned. For the iguana had not only survived the wrath of the ocean, it had emerged as a symbol of courage and tenacity. Every creature on the island, from the smallest insect to the largest mammal, carried a piece of the iguana's story in their hearts. It had become a part of their collective memory, a reminder that even in the face of insurmountable odds, hope could bloom and survival was possible. So whenever the tide rose or the rocks loomed ominously on the horizon, the animals would remember the iguana. They would recall its struggle, its bravery, and ultimately, its triumph. And they knew that no matter what challenges they faced, they could draw strength from the story of the trapped iguana, the creature that had dared to defy the odds and lived to tell the tale. And with that thought, they faced their own battles with renewed vigor, knowing that within them lay the same spirit of survival that had allowed the iguana to conquer the rising tide. If you liked this story, then check out this one about a man who jumped into a river to save a dog, but instead got swept away. Just like our hero in this story, he too had to battle against the current to stay alive. You'll love it.